the Women Changing the World podcast, a podcast on a mission to bring you some of the most amazing women I know who are doing incredible things to generally make the world a better place. From corporate sustainability to straight up magic and everything in between, you'll meet the real life humans who are birthing the new. I'm your host, Liz Best, and I'm here to amplify the stories and voices of women who are changing the world. Welcome to another episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Today it's my absolute pleasure to sit down with Stacy Magdaluyo, who is a director on the Purpose and Inclusion team at PwC. She's someone that I've been friends with for over a decade, and she is doing really cool work to advance inclusion in a massive organization. She's also just a really cool human who was a founding member of the Girls Club Mastermind. Today we talked about everything from how improv has shaped her approach to her corporate job, to the stories we tell ourselves and how to use data to craft a better narrative in your own mind, to leading with gratitude and what it looks like and how you can tap into it. I just know you're going to enjoy my conversation with Stacy as much as I did. Welcome to another episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. I am so excited to be sitting down today with one of my favorite humans on the face of the planet, Stacy Magdaluyo. She is a director on the Purpose and Inclusion team at PwC, and an all-around sustainability badass. Stacy, it's so fun to get to have you on the podcast.
Yes, this is so fun. I feel like we're just talking and we're out for a run.
Totally. I mean, honestly, I have so much fun running with you, and I feel like I always have some life insight or inspiration as a result of our run conversations that I was like, I feel like we should share this maybe with some other people.
Yeah.
And I know no matter what, we'll have a great time. So.
Yes, agreed.
Amazing. Well, before we jump into questions, would you mind just briefly introducing yourself to our listeners?
Sure. So the hardest part is over, which is pronouncing my last name, which you did. But as Liz mentioned, I'm Stacy Magdaluyo. I am living in San Diego, which is my hometown. I'm a mother to just funny, curious 2-year-old named Raimi. And I have a wonderful husband, Pete, who's been just an awesome partner, especially over the last couple of years, being new parents during the pandemic. And as Liz mentioned, I'm working at PwC and I'm really exploring this space of diversity, equity, and inclusion within a pretty large company here in the US. So a lot of new things have happened in the last 2 years, but a lot of learnings that I think are I'm so excited to share. One of which obviously being the Girls Club, being one of the founding members. But yeah, in general, I love to do anything related to music, whether it's singing in the car, singing with people in karaoke, or dancing. And fortunately, my son loves to do those same things. So it's a nice little break from work. But I am happy to be here and to be talking to you, Liz.
Yay. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to do a shameless plug for when I do feel like your life more than anyone I know is the musical. And also, I'll never forget, as context, Stacy and I actually met in grad school at UCSD, and I knew, Stacy, that you were a singer, like high level, but I had never heard you sing, and we were having our talent show, and I remember I was in the shower, like getting ready to go to the talent show, and you were practicing Adele, And I was like, how did Adele get into my apartment? Like,
Just casually drop by.
I
Yeah.
was so blown away. I was like, oh, wow. You can
Oh,
like all caps sing.
oh man.
So
Yeah,
cool.
I didn't know you could hear me, but now I know.
I love it. Well, so because this is the Women Changing the World podcast, I love opening with like the biggest question, which is if
Mhm.
you could change one thing about the world, what would your one thing be?
Yes. Um, Assuming it could be easy, I would love for everyone to have more empathy in every interaction, right? Whether it's with people you know, family or friends, people you don't know, or our planet, right? Just understanding that everyone's going through something, everybody has some sort of frailty or insecurity. So, what if we just took care of each other rather than waste our energy in taking each other down?
Mm,
So, easier, way easier to think and dream and say than to have happen, but that's what I would change.
I love that though. I feel like it actually is something that is so accessible on an individual level of just taking a minute to like ask the question as we engage with people like what might be going on? Like what's the most generous
Mm-hmm.
explanation for this situation? But it's
Totally.
so hard.
We definitely don't do it enough, or we assume, right, someone's coming with negative intent, or we assume that somebody's doing something, on purpose. But I think if we just, to your point, right, like that is an action we can take every day on a very small level. And all those things would just, I think, have a multiplying effect, right? Like if you do that, if you treat one person that way, or someone sees you treat the earth a certain way, right, and care for our earth, the hope is that that just continues to be in people's minds as they go on and talk to somebody else or interact with the earth in their own way. But it's wishful, but I feel like it's worked in a little way. And if anyone's seen Ted Lasso,
I wonder.
like you know what that means.
I love it. I wondered how long we would go in our conversation before Ted Lasso came up. I'm sure this is not the last time.
I know. New drinking game.
I love it. For anyone listening who has a glass in front of them, take note. Um,
Yes.
so I'm curious, can you share? I know you shared a little bit of this just in San Diego life and Pete and Rainy, but what does your day to day right now currently look like? What's on your plate? What fills your days?
Yeah. So work from home, hashtag, or work from hot tub, which is a term that Liz and I have created. Of, hey, if you can do your work from a place that makes you happy. But
That's a small but important T. WFHT.
T, yeah, exactly. But so yeah, I mean, during the day, I am working. I'm excited that I get to lead a team of people who really inspire me every day. We're a lot of fun. We're data nerds. We're passionate about making change. But I think that we have a very lighthearted, just fun team. And so we're a brand new team. And with that comes, a lot of responsibility, right? To really think about how does a big company really support underrepresented groups in their careers, or to help them feel more of a sense of belonging, um, and how do we use data to really do that and accelerate that change? Um, and the hope is, right, if we get things right within our own four walls, similarly that multiplier effect of, well, could we share this with other companies? Like, what have we learned that we could then tell others about? So it's really scary and hard, but exciting all at the same time. So that's, my day job, if you will. And then outside of that, I really, really, really love connecting with other women who are also doing hard things to try to make the world better. So we mentioned the girls club, and that's really something, Liz, you manifested into reality. um, but it really changed my approach to, really anything at work or at home. Um, Mostly, right, it's this concept of creating community, and replacing sometimes the very harsh inner voices that we can have, that I have in my own head, with just empathetic, empowering voices of other women in this community. And I just feel like that's so nourishing to me, to be able to just talk to people, know that I'm not alone, know that, hey, my mistakes from the past could help somebody not make that mistake, um, has been really awesome. And then I, mentioned I'm a mom and a wife, and juggling all that obviously isn't easy. I don't think anyone would say that's easy. Um, but I have learned to just realize, like, oh, that gives me such energy. Like, if you truly disconnect from all the other stuff and then get to be present and focus on, just the moments with your family, like that helps fuel the other parts of my life. And it took me so long to realize that, because I was always thinking, like, oh, let me think about work while I'm watching my son. And that just, nobody really wins there. So it was like, oh, it's all just fueling each other. If you focus on one thing and disconnect from the other, it'll help you when you return to work, as an example.
I love that observation so much, of like, just to fully, and I know it's like, I'm sure a constant dance. I mean, I'm not a mom, but a constant dance of like, but how do we like fully be present for the thing that we're actually doing, as opposed to trying to like mentally manage all of it all the time.
Yeah, because you don't really get points for doing that. Like, no one's going to be like, great job, you thought about 17 things today. Like, nope, just you. And actually, I can't remember where I was when I thought about this, but it's probably at something where it was like a storytelling event. My husband's really, really, really good at telling stories. His whole family is. They're from Kentucky. That was like one of the first observations I noticed, is like, oh, everybody just sits around and tells stories. But I just remember thinking, oh, I started journaling on the flight back from Kentucky after meeting my husband's family for the first time. And I was like, I should make a list of all of the stories that I want to tell in the future. But I looked back at the rest of my journal and it was all to-do lists. Like, that's the first thing so I just thought, you know what, no one's going to read these to-do lists. I should, focus on the moments and be present and think about the stories that could come out of it, even if it's a good or bad moment, right? There's a good story in it. Rather than the to-do lists. So,
oh my God, I feel like that is such a deep life truth, of like, focus on the stories, not the to-do list. It is a reminder that I myself often need. But I love what you said too about, it could be a good one or a bad one, but like, it's story. Like,
yes.
I dated someone when I was down in San Diego. That was like one of the biggest life truths he gave me, is he's like, well, it's going to be a great time or a great story.
Yes. Well, and you are a stand-up, Liz. Like, that all the weird, bad misfortunes make really good material. So.
Totally. Sometimes it takes some time to get the perspective, but I think I learned at some point, thankfully early, that like, the faster I could laugh at myself, the less painful life was going to be.
I love that. I feel like when I was in middle school, I remember tripping across the quad, like where everybody is, and you think that everyone's looking at you. And I was like, well, I better just laugh at myself now, rather than, look embarrassed. People will think like, oh, I did that on purpose. So, little
Totally. No, I
little
think
microcosm of what you learned.
no, I honestly feel like that was like the direct implementation for me. Similarly, is like if you trip, and I feel like that was the example given is like if you trip, laugh first, like laugh before anyone else can laugh at you, and then you're all laughing together.
Yes. Love it.
Oh my
I
gosh,
will keep that in
totally.
mind as I know I will trip in the near future.
I still now that is like actually my natural reaction to tripping, but it was a reprogrammed reaction for sure. Well, I would love to hear. This is one of my favorite things to do on the podcast is to hear people's stories of how they came to be where they are. And I know that you had such an interesting kind of like career trajectory to come to be where you are today. And I would love if, to the extent that you feel comfortable sharing with us, like, I also think it's so interesting. So many people on this podcast like had different professional experiences of the recession in like 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yep.
Unfortunately, that has not been the only recession in our lifetimes, but I think for a lot of us, it happened at like a really formative moment. So if you're willing to go back that far, would love to hear a little bit about like how you came to be doing the work you're doing today and like living the life you're living today.
Yes. And it's so funny. If you continue doing this long into the future, you're going to be asking people about COVID. Like the pandemic and how they dealt with that.
Oh my God. I can't wait for us to feel nostalgic about this.
Yeah, on Mars or wherever we are. I, yeah, so basically, I was right out of college, and I moved from the Bay Area to New York to work in finance. This was 2007. And I was really, I was soaking it all in, right? You got to meet all these new people, right? As part of this new analyst class. You got to experience life in this new city and actually have some money, right? That you could call your own. Uh, and then the financial crisis hit. I happened to be working in fixed income at the time, which, like, in that space, like, everyone joked how that was normally like a sleepy asset class. You just like set it and forget it. And then that was not the case at all. Like, this is where all the action was. And just that whole experience, right? Of that being my first job, like real job, just completely changed what I thought work was, or I guess set the baseline for what I thought work was, because like each day I would come in, I wouldn't know if my team still existed. Like,
Oh,
I didn't,
that's so
I didn't know.
existential.
Yeah. And it's, there was a lot of glamour around working in finance when I, was applying and interviewing and all that. And all of that was just gone. I mean, it was like, you just didn't know. You didn't know if the markets were going to function the next day. Like, you didn't know what clients were going to be furious about something or need you to explain like every little detail. It was just constant state of unknown. And this is I don't know, whatever. We're all friends here. There were days where I would look down at my chair and there'd be like a pool of sweat just there, because that's just what how I was feeling, the kind of pressure I was feeling. So, I obviously my experience very like minimal compared to just what people went through and financial implications, like, and losing their homes and everything. But it just, overall, right? Like my experience, it was a confusing, very emotional time. And in a very weird way, though, it did force me to have to learn how to just keep delivering quality work in a high pressure environment, right? Like do it fast, make sure it's accurate, and just get stuff done. Because there's very little time to kind of worry or moan about it or all of that. You just had to, it was very all hands on deck all the time. And I literally have nothing to compare it to before that. So that's what I thought work was, is that you should just be glad you have a job. And I think that that's kind of colored my, like, the rest of the experiences that I've had. So that was very intense, 2, 3 years. I guess the other good thing, aside from just, that kind of crazy work ethic, was that I got to see and really understand microfinance at the time, which was not really widely known. But it really opened my eyes to see that there's other careers that I could pursue that are more aligned with my, kind of my purpose, which for me is, how do I take all the opportunities that I've been given with my family moving from the Philippines to the United States, like I was born here, and how do I use those opportunities to really empower and elevate others? So I, basically, my dad also passed away after those 3 years of me working in that crazy intense environment. He passed away, and that really drilled into me, like, okay, I need to really think about, what am I doing with my life, right? Like, is this job taking me further away from my family, taking me further away from my purpose? And so I applied for grad school in San Diego. It was helpful for a lot of reasons. It allowed me to be with my mom, right? And especially in those first couple of years when we were without my dad and trying to figure out like how to be a family without him. And it led me to you, Liz, I think like day one of the program.
Totally.
I got to meet you, and I also got to understand what corporate social responsibility even was, which again was not a widely known term. And I remember I was sitting with you, Liz, probably after a run and probably after a dinner. And I was telling you like what I wanted to do as a career without having a name for it. And you looked at me and you were like, you should really look into corporate social responsibility.
Oh my gosh, really? I do not remember
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. No, I remember it so clearly. So it's just funny that like the coaching began and you didn't even remember it. But that's really, from then on, I was like, oh, you could actually, make a lot of change within a big company. I started taking the classes in our grad program around corporate responsibility, got connected to an alum from our grad program who worked in corporate responsibility at my current company. And that's really kind of what allowed me to kind of step into that space. And I've been in that space for the last 10 years. So, back then, right, you just don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know what new fields, what new industries are going to be out there. But I think the thing that you can be sure of, right, is just learn as much as you can from whatever it is that you happen to be doing. Treat people well, because you don't know if that could lead to other opportunities. And just be patient, trust that, whatever the next thing is that you do land in, like that's not the last place you're going to be, right? Like that's a place for you to learn as much as you can. And then just keep your eyes open and be ready for the next thing. And I think that's all that we can really do, especially as technology is rapidly changing everything. Like we don't know the state of the world in the next 10 years, but you can still have some sense of control, right, with where you are, and just try to make yourself better and try to make other people around you better.
Totally. Well, and you're just such a living embodiment of that. And it's crazy thinking back now, just like how much was happening like on a personal level when I first met you and had no idea. And you're just such a ray of sunshine. And even hearing like the wisdom that you share now about like, trusting that it's all going to work out. And like, I know we both actually got into our corporate jobs via like, mine was via an internship, yours was via a contract role. And it's one thing to say it now. And I also like look back at us like 10 plus years ago. And I'm like, I wish I could have believed it then, even though it was 100% true. Right.
Yeah. I can't believe it's been that long.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Well, I mean, you throughout the course of our friendship have inspired me in like such fun ways. I know we were talking about running, which we affectionately refer to as laughing forward.
Yes, yes.
You're also someone who taught me the importance of drinking sparkling water out of a wine glass if you're feeling festive.
Yep.
So I'm curious, like, what's your current favorite like life hack to bring more joy into your day to day? Because I'm sure there's something.
Yes, this came up not too long ago, and I think I texted you about it. Which is well, a couple things. So this all like relates to work, but trying to bring some fun into it because let's be real, we spend a lot of time at work. So if it's a drag, like that sucks all around. But one of the things that I've tried to do is if I know that we're a group of us are meeting in person, we use Google Docs. I'm sure most people do, but we rather than put the agenda, right, like title the actual file agenda, I try to put party. So it's like, whatever the topic is, it's that party. Or sending out a note with some pre-work for people, and I'll call it pre-game. And so far, nobody said anything bad about it, but also nobody said anything. But
Oh my God. Well, I love it so much. I feel like if someone said, like, here's the pregame for our party later, I'd be like, obviously
great,
reading this email.
yes, yes. So I don't think we're going to be drinking during it, but it at least makes people think of things not work related, and hopefully just unlock some, just creativity. Because I've noticed over the years, it's really hard to like give your best work if you don't feel safe or supported or like there's no, harsh repercussions, right? If you say something that might be wrong. And it's kind of this like improv environment. I did one improv class, but I watch a lot of stand-ups and love SNL.
Oh my goodness. If you wanted to be a professional improviser, you 100% could be.
Oh man. So, but yeah, that environment, right? Like I didn't realize this when I took my first class, but so much of it, well, not so much, but the beginning part, right, is just like everybody participates. You throw a ball around, right? You say something that comes to mind. Like it's getting everybody engaged, making everybody feel safe. And I think you have to do that in today's work environment because there's so much untapped potential in people. Like you kind of have to create the environment that brings it out in them or makes them feel comfortable enough to. And I've known what it's like to work for people who don't make me feel safe or supported. And I know what my work was like there versus the people who assume the best, right, in me. And then it makes me want to just show, like to prove myself more or do more things. And then everybody ends up in a better place. So it's just, I mean, I've been lucky, like with my team and the things that I do. I know it's different for everybody, but that's, I guess, one thing that you could do, right? Like if you're in a position where, you can affect the environment of the people you work with, do it like that. It makes your job more fun. It makes their job more fun. It makes the work better. And I think you do that really well, Liz. Our friend
Thank you.
Arlene, who's I hope listening later. Like that kind of thing. Like just treat your coworkers like your friends and be as empathetic, right? And as fun. Like that's, in a very simple way. Like I think that's just what you should try to do and kind of see what the results are.
Have you been meaning to expand the circle of amazing women in your network, but it's been hard to find the time to connect consistently? Are you a member of a small team creating a big impact and you wish you had additional brains to tap to think strategically about what's next? Are you craving personal growth, community, and magic in your personal and professional life, but feeling like you don't know where to find it? Imagine if you had dedicated time and space to build relationships with other badass women in impact. Imagine if you had access to a brain trust of rock stars who are ready to help you solve any challenge, personal or professional. Imagine if you had an extended team of like minded women cheering you on, hyping you up, opening doors, and helping you make your wildest dreams come true. Imagine if you took the time to really invest in yourself and be intentional about the impact you are here to make. The Girls Club Mastermind is a 5-month mastermind for women who are changing the world. It is an intimate community of powerful women who are dedicated to lifting each other up. They are your hype women, your cheerleaders, and your extended team. The next round of the Girls Club Mastermind kicks off in April, and you don't want to miss it. Head to elizabethbest.com/girlsclub. That's ELISABETHBEST.com/girlsclub to learn more and apply today. Totally. Well, it's just like, how can we be human? And I love the improv call out, because I mean, I think the number one thing, I did a couple improv classes, and the number one thing I learned from improv, which you'll laugh because you've called me out on this, but I don't know if you knew it was an improv thing, is the yes and.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, I have worked so hard. I continue to work so hard to not say but or no.
Yeah.
It's just like yes and.
And
That's like one of the core tenets of improv, is like, you don't shut someone's idea down, you just build on it, no matter how you may feel about it. I love the idea of bringing that philosophy, and thinking about like the ball game into your job. And I feel like it's been so cool as your friend, to see you get to, over the past 10 years, like really step into some cool leadership roles. And I definitely want to like also talk about like lessons learned along the way, as you've been like a professional athlete. So we'll come back to that. But I know that leading with gratitude is a big part of like how you approach leading the work that you're leading now. So I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about like what that means to you, and why it's important.
Yeah. And I think especially as we've gone through / are still in the pandemic, I'm hoping this is happening at other companies too, but I know for us, like an intentional focus on how people are doing, right? And like kind of dialing up the care of their well-being. Still working, still moving forward, but like just having a lot of appreciation for whatever someone's situation might be. So it's hard for me to tell if it's because of that, right? The pandemic and the effects that it's had on everybody's kind of mental and physical health. Or if it's the girls club and kind of the things that I've been learning. But I think leading with gratitude is just like treating everybody as humans, right? And just, I guess, assuming, right, that like, hey, they're putting their best forward. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna, not say like, hey, like, let's tweak this, like, have we considered this? Because I think that at the heart of it too, like, people come to work, they want to grow, like they want to develop their skills. So I think it's just treating people with the best, or assuming the best intent. I think it's, whenever you bring people together, carving out a moment to just reflect on what worked really well, whether it's that day or like you're looking back over the year or the quarter or whatever. It's allowing people to do a little bit of a show and tell too, right? Of like some things that they've learned, some, product or deliverable, right, that they've created, like just what was the journey behind it. Because I think that humanizes a lot of the work that we do, especially in our team, which is very data focused. Data is a piece of it, but like the journey, the narrative, right, the conversations that have been taking place around it, that's all super interesting. So it's giving people the space to be able to share that. And, if we were in person, we'd high five about it, but we're not in person. So, it's really just creating space to like celebrate people, celebrate each other. I've recently learned through Girls Club to celebrate myself, right? And I think that's really what it is. It's not beating yourself up for what you could have done, right? It's saying, hey, we did our damn best. There are other circumstances that came up. Did we do our best? Yes. So let's be proud of that. Which is hard to do when there's so many factors in, not only within a company, but like with our whole world and society. But that's at least what I like try to aim for. And I hope too, like that again, this whole multiplier effect, if you're able to give people a space where they feel supported, hopefully, right, they're able to do that with their immediate sphere of influence. And then later on, right, like whatever team they're on, that's something that they can also try to practice. So long answer to what gratitude is, but it's a really strong approach for anything in life, right? It's a learned skill. It didn't come naturally to me at all to carve out space for gratitude and celebration. But man, if you do that, right? If you create that narrative in your head, even looking back on a bad experience or a good experience, like that's kind of the key to anything, right? There's no accounting that takes place of like, oh, did that happen or did that happen? Like, no, you're going to remember what you took away from it. And similarly, when you're talking to other people, right? Like whatever your narrative is, that's what they're going to take away from it. So it's empowering, right? To just be like, oh, I actually have a choice here.
Totally. You're reminding me of this quote. I don't even know where it came from. And it's like, people won't remember what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm curious, I know like this, narrative building is something that's been so transformational for you. Like, do you have any like tips or tricks if someone's listening and they're thinking like, like how do I create a narrative around an experience or around my work or around like my team's work? Like, what advice would you offer?
Yeah, I think for someone who, like me, had a really hard time kind of taking ownership of that narrative, I would say talk to other people, right? Talk to your close friends, talk to, your partner, talk to your family, talk to other people at work, and just, either you can bring it up or just talk to them about something, right? Like that issue that you're going through or whatever. Because more often than not, they will have a narrative of you that is so positive, or more positive than your own narrative for yourself, I should say. I shouldn't say it's like always going to be glowing, but, and there's something to be said about just a third party point of view. I think this is why, right, a lot of companies hire consultants to come in and, review things or do an analysis for them, is because that company probably got stuck in a narrative of like, oh, that thing's going to be too hard, or, oh, we're really bad at this. Right. So in the same way, I needed to hear it from other people to just feel like, oh, okay, well, let me like forget about those other things that I think, and let me just like hold on to the things that seem to be a common thread across all these other data points, and then use that as my narrative so that going forward, and I kind of feel this now, like if I get some sort of like negative thing, like feedback or something doesn't go right, at least I know like I'm on the right track, like it's not so
existential,
devastating. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think like, so honestly, some of that comes with time, just being like in a team or in a company or in the working world outside of school. Like some of that takes time, because I know once you're first starting, like it can feel like any piece of feedback is huge, right? Just because that's your only piece of feedback. So I would just say, like, talk to other people, know that they've probably got a narrative of you that isn't all bad, like the narrative you might have in your head. And then also just be patient and give it time for those data points to kind of come in and be collected. Um, yeah. And then I feel like I'm so speaking my data, like I'm revealing my data head right now, but
I love it.
that's helped a lot. It's kind of the
Totally.
equivalent of Googling an answer, but like
Totally.
you can't Google yourself.
Well, but I think, and honestly, I do this work with a lot of my one-on-one clients. Like, you kind of can, in the sense that, like, if you ask, like, 3, 4, 5 people who know you, and whether you're thinking in a personal
hmm
capacity or work capacity, like, hey, what are the 3 words that you would use to describe me? I've literally given this as homework. Like, they're going to come back and say some things that you're like, oh my God, that's me. It can be like, I mean, people are so generous. I think it can be so validating. And obviously, like, I would say, if you do that, like, offer to return the favor, people want to know. But I love that. I love the data, like, lens that you're applying to it, of like, yeah, like, get some of those data points, and let some of that, like, be your story in your head.
hmm
It's so interesting to me how we can be so much meaner to ourselves in our heads than, like, we would ever allow a physical person, to be to us in our life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so wild. But I also really want to make sure that we talk about, because you are doing such cool work about, how we can create more inclusive companies, inclusive
hmm
cultures within organizations. I'd be remiss if I didn't make sure
Yeah.
I asked you a little bit about that. And I'm curious, like, you are using data to really think through, like, what this can truly mean, what it can truly look like. And
Mhm.
what do you think organizations can do to meaningfully move the needle in creating cultures where everyone can feel safe to be their full and authentic self?
Yeah. Um, yeah. And I think what's interesting is like trying to do this at a large scale with a company of our size, but we're dealing with very individual human interactions and issues. Um, so I guess one thing that we've learned, which very much relates to my role, is just like you have to be very granular, very surgical. That's the term that I that comes to mind, like about your approach. So as an example, right, blanketing all of a particular group into one race or ethnicity and assuming that everyone's experience, no matter if they're, male, female, or at a certain level or a certain sub ethnicity within that, like everyone's experience is so different and so unique that we have to go further and we have to look at those smaller groups. Um, so I would just say, be very surgical about your approach, and there is no blanket solution.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to, you know, I feel like so much of business is like, oh, what can you scale? What can what's your one size fits all approach? And that just doesn't work when you're actually dealing with humans. So one thing that I've noticed too is just there's um, a lot of people on our team who invest in the relationships with other parts of the firm.
Mm.
And I have so much respect for that because I think that's what that's how you make change, right? Is like you need to be at a certain level of camaraderie with other functions, other teams to understand like, okay, what are the actual levers for change? What are the processes? What could we change in order to create a certain outcome? And you can't do that in a silo. Like you can't do that on an ivory tower. You can't do that. And there's so many movies that show like what happens. I'm not, Hunger Games and Uprisings as a strange example that I just thought about, but you have to be connected in order to actually think about like and design something that could make change. And the other thing is you just have to you have to start by listening. You cannot assume, right, that just because a certain trend has been taking place over the last few years, you can't assume that you know why that is. Like, you have to start with listening. And it's long sort of, it's a very long marathon. But I think if you surround yourself with the right people, if you surround yourself with just that right mindset, like, you could really do anything. And I guess we're laughing forward at work where we could try to. But that's what I'd say. It's just like, we've got to keep it, try to do this blanket approach. And just make sure that you, I guess, have like a very human relationship with people outside of your team, so that you can really think together about how to create that change. So all of this is weaving together the running thing, the, like, be empathetic, everybody's a human thing. But it's all, I guess that's what it really all just clicked for me once I kind of moved into this role, focusing on our inclusion efforts within our four walls. So
Totally. No, I love that so much. I think so often for so much of this like change agent type work, like I've been struck again and again in my career by the fact that like as an outsider, you like look at a company and you're like, oh, that company should be doing like X. Like, why aren't they doing X? And often, my personal opinion is that the reason that they're not doing it is usually comes down to like how influential, or like, but I don't mean influential like an influencer, like in terms of seniority, but like how good of relationships does the person who's in charge of like shepherding that initiative have within the organization to be able to get everyone on the same team and like rowing in the same direction.
yes, which took me a long time to realize. Um, Probably longer than most people, but yeah, that's the biggest thing, right? It's not about being the smartest person in the room. Like, you could know and like, climate change sustainability is very technical. It's not about being the most technical person. It's how do you like bridge the gap and make everybody come along the journey in a way that they want to, not that they're being forced to. Which that should be in a job description somewhere. But
Totally. It's like, how do you quantify that? Because I also think what is going to be effective is often different, like organization to organization too. But I think there are some core principles, a lot of which you've touched on, that work. And oh my gosh, I realized like we're coming up on time, even though I could talk to you literally forever, and I intend to. But
life, yeah.
There are a couple other things I wanted to make sure to ask you about, and one is leadership lessons from Ted Lasso. But specifically, I know, and we kind of like glossed over this, we don't need to get into all the details, but you've held a number of different roles within the same organization over the past 10 years. Like, you've like played a lot of positions on the team, if we're going to continue the metaphor.
Yep.
And I know you have a picture of Ted Lasso like up in front of you right now. So I'm curious, like, just in terms of like anything that you want to share with people listening who may or may not have watched the show with leadership things that have come through from that.
There's like a silly part of it, which is, for anyone who's watched the show, right? Like, he's not British. It's from like the heart of America, and just is unabashedly that way. That's just, one example, right, of people really want to be on a team with somebody who is being themselves. And it could be different than what they're used to. But there's just something there about like being your authentic self, and people can either reject it or they can warm up to it. But that then allows other people, right, to feel like, oh, well, I can be silly too, or I can be, I can be whoever I am. So I think that's one thing, is just be who you are and don't apologize for it. And I think the other thing too is like, just keep moving forward. So if you don't know enough about something, just keep moving forward. Like, get really invest in getting to know the people who do know a lot about it, and the rest will follow, because no one should ever feel like I need to know 100%, 120% about something before I can make an, like, make a decision or move forward. If that was the case, like, I mean, for good or bad, like, all of our history wouldn't have happened. But so I think it's just, it's that, right? It's like, just move forward, trust the people around you, invest in the people around you, and it will all work itself out. And as I say this, I'm really hoping somehow I get biscuits that are delivered to me, or I can find biscuits, because that was a big part of how he approached his boss. But anyway, maybe I'm just hungry,
Totally.
which, as you know, Liz, is always the case.
Yes. Well, I'll be Googling San Diego biscuit delivery services after our calls. Let you know if I find anything good. Well, I feel like you've already shared so much wisdom, and I'm really curious what your answer to this question is. What advice would you want to give your younger self? And you can totally picture or pick an age, or just like generic younger self advice.
Probably, I mean, going back to the theme earlier, like, focus on the stories. I think stories force you to reflect, and that forces you in a weird way to, like, live in the moment as well. So I would say, just focus on the stories. Life is a collection of stories, and you should feel like you've got a lot of good stuff, a lot of good material that you could actually talk about. So permission to just reflect, permission to be yourself, and feel like that's okay. I wish I could tell my younger self that, because maybe she would have written down some stories.
I love it. Well, in the same vein, I think I ask everyone on the podcast for like their inspirational post-it note, and my desk is covered right now in messages from people. I'm gonna get these printed one day in some form or fashion. But what would you want to put on your inspirational post-it note?
Yes. There's so many. I would say,
you don't have to pick one if you have a couple.
Okay, good. Because one of them is actually a card you sent me, Liz, which is "I love your boundaries." That's up there. I've got Ted Lasso and the Believe sign. And then one that I have at the top of my to-do list, so I see it every day, is actually a quote from Indra Nooyi, the former CEO of Pepsi, which is that leadership is hard to define and good leadership even harder. But if you can get people to follow you to the ends of the earth, you are a great leader. Those are the three that I look at each day.
I love that so much. Like letting it wash over me for a second. Oh my goodness. Well, as you know, we could talk for hours. I still have like 18,000 more things I want to ask you on everything from like boundaries to feminine leadership and data and decision making and human-centered design. So I'm going to extend an invite now for you to come back one day in the future.
Yes.
Amazing. And I would love to end with, like, is there a good place if people want to like find you or keep in touch with you or follow along? Is there a good place for them to do so?
Yeah. Probably I don't have a website or anything. So my
like
head just
LinkedIn,
goes to
maybe?
LinkedIn and Instagram. Yeah. I'd say LinkedIn. If you can spell my last name.
I'll link it in the show notes so people can track you down. Amazing. Stacy, you're the best. And honestly, it's been like so fun to chat with you today. It was such an honor to have you as a founding member of the Girls Club. I feel like you just brought so much joy to the experience. And I'm just so grateful to have you in my world. Thank you so much for all of the knowledge and wisdom and advice and quotable quotes that you've shared with our listeners today.
Well, thanks for unlocking that part of me that that I felt comfortable enough to share. So I am happy to come back. And yeah, thanks for inviting me, Liz.
Oh my gosh, of course. My pleasure. Have an awesome rest of your day, Stace. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Women Changing the World podcast. Please rate and review the Women Changing the World podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, and don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is liz.best, that's lis.best, or you can find me on LinkedIn by searching my name, Liz Best. Join my mail list by visiting elizabethbest.com/monthly meditation, and you'll receive all the latest updates on events, retreats, and opportunities to work with me, plus a monthly love note from my heart to your inbox. I am so excited to keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next episode.